Good evening, everyone. My name is Ting Ting Chang. I'm the director of the Equal Rights Amendment Project at Columbia Law School's Center for Gender and Sexuality Law. Welcome to week 5 of our Reimagining Gender Justice Workshop series, an incredibly proud partnership of ours, along with Generation Ratify and our dear friend and ERA expert and podcaster extraordinaire, Kate Kelly, who's on the call with us today. So we created the series to provide an in-depth educational platform on the ERA and the lead up to our ERA Youth Convention, which will be held pretty soon in Seneca Falls from July 21st to 22nd. The details will be in the chat, and I encourage everyone to join us if you haven't signed up already, or to consider sponsoring a young person to join this historic youth gathering, where we'll mark the centennial anniversary of when the ERA was first unveiled at the First Presbyterian Church of Seneca Falls, and where we will converge in that same site to chart a new path to the modern equality movement through the ERA. So far in the series, we've heard from experts and we've delved into the ERA's long path to adoption, the historic and existing legal frameworks for gender justice in the law, the state of gender protests and activism both abroad and nationally, and the very important conversation of the ERA and intersectionality. Our previous conversations are available on YouTube on the Center for Gender and Sexuality Law's YouTube channel, and we've also dropped that into the chat. So I'll do a quick intro of everyone speaking on this call, and then I'll start out with a general question of, please share your social justice origin story. Please describe what motivates you to do the work that you do, and also tell us about what you're engaged in currently. So let's start with Liza. Liza Mickens is an organizer in gender equality and a spokesperson for Vote Equality US. And by the way, all the organizational links we are also putting in the chat so you can read further and get in touch. Liza is a 2019 graduate of James Madison University. She was born and raised in Richmond, Virginia, and grew up sharing her great-great-grandmother, Maggie Lena Walker Story, who happens to be the first African-American woman, and maybe also the first woman to own a bank and to serve as the bank president in America, among many other groundbreaking achievements. Liza is an organizer extraordinaire on the ERA in her own right. And so welcome, Liza.
Hi there. Thanks so much for having me. Can you hear me? Sorry. Okay.
Yes.
Amazing.
So tell us about your social justice origin stories, what you really care about these days, and tell us about the work that you've been doing.
Awesome. Yeah, I would like to say it's in my blood, but I do feel really inspired to continue my ancestors' legacy. I think that especially in this 100-year celebration of the Equal Rights Amendment, I am thinking back to what my great-great-grandmother was doing 100 years ago, and all of the walls and doors that she was breaking down for us. And so it is such an honor to be able to be in the city where she accomplished so much, and continuing her gender equality legacy. I got involved in 2018, a little late to the game of past 100 years, but it was really through an activist in Richmond and Virginia's becoming the final state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment that I began speaking out on the issue. And so I work with an organization, Vote Equality US, that was born out of Virginia's ratification, but also has representatives and organizers from Nevada as well as Illinois. So we are a national organization working towards the recognition of our fully ratified Equal Rights Amendment. And so in that, it's a lot of different initiatives, and we're really trying to keep the fun alive in this movement, and through means of grassroots organizing. So for anybody who will be at Seneca Falls in a few weeks, our notorious RVG will be there, the lovely ruthless vote getter. will be out in Seneca Falls, and we take her on bus tours throughout the South and throughout different parts of the country just to engage voters and also educate them. Because I think that one of the biggest things with the Equal Rights Amendment, especially with our generation, is a lack of education on it. And so just bringing awareness to different college campuses, to different youth groups, but also to different churches as well. And then one other really fun initiative we just completed here in Virginia is Artists for ERA. And so we've just reimagined the artwork around the Equal Rights Amendment, because we haven't seen new updated artwork imagery since the 70s, with the green ERA Now buttons. And so inviting a group of young, diverse artists to reimagine the artwork around the movement has been a really fun way to just raise awareness again. So I'm so happy to be here and so honored to be a part of this conversation and, a part of the work that is still to be done.
Thank you for sharing that. All right, next up is Laura Strassfeld, a very good friend of mine. She's the founding executive director of Period Law. In 2016, Laura orchestrated the class action lawsuit challenging New York's tampon tax as unconstitutional, which then resulted in the immediate repeal by the legislature. And in 2019, she hosted the first ever legal conference devoted to this project, called the Tampon Tax Lab at Columbia Law School, hosted by the Center for Gender and Sexuality Law. She has since recruited pro bono attorneys to research and challenge the tampon tax in court across the United States. She was co-counsel on Beggs v. Michigan, which is a case in Michigan that argued that the state's tampon tax was unconstitutional. Laura built a huge movement around that case, brought together national and local organizations to create the Michigan Period Action Day Coalition, staged the largest national rally for the end of the tampon tax. And as a result, Michigan enacted legislation to remove the tax. So her experiences are rich. She is a civil rights litigator and a big picture kind of visionary thinker about the frontier of gender justice, using different mechanisms to push for cultural and legal change. So I'll hand it over to you, Laura.
Thank you so much, Ting Ting. And it is really a privilege to be here. I am in Holland, in Amsterdam right now, and it's a little after midnight. So I'm very alert and very awake and very, like I said, privileged to be among you all, because I went to law school many decades ago to just sue big companies and sue for justice. And I moved to New York. I bought a box of tampons, a chapstick with probably exact change, and I couldn't afford the purchase because I realized at that moment that the box of tampons were taxed and the chapstick was not. And the clerk, I very clearly remember telling me that the chapstick had a medical use. It was exempt on that basis, but the tampons did not. And I had just started law school at Columbia, went back up to the library and looked up the law, and sure enough, at that time, tampons and pads were categorized as cosmetics and taxed as cosmetics. And that made me super angry. And I wrote up a memo arguing that that should be unconstitutional, and then talked to everybody I knew about how unfair that was. And then within a couple of years, I realized that there was a bill that had been introduced to exempt these products. And I thought, okay, that's it. It's a common sense bill. It will be passed. And that's when I learned really about, for myself personally, about how social movements really work and the importance of advocates and activists and people on the ground, because, and also the media and the culture shifting, because I really was so naive to think that a bill that was so common sense when, all other necessities in New York and really around the country are exempt from tax, that these necessities for half the population would also be included. The fact is that at that time, when I finally, decades later, filed a lawsuit in New York, and that was only after there were advocates on the ground making a lot of noise about this and people in the press making noise about this, I was able to get a law firm to file a lawsuit with me, and it was successful in that way in getting the legislature to finally pass a bill that had been introduced over 20 years in a row. And at that time in 2016, 40 states taxed these products, and now we're down to 21. And this is like, in a lot of ways, great movement and, fast work. But if it takes 7 years to do this, you realize, something that really has no opposition, just ignorance, you realize what more we have to do. So I'm very thrilled to be included in this conversation. We've used the ERA in various states. We've argued that the ERA was also a grounds for bringing a lawsuit, and the conversations now in the states that still have this tax, and yes, there are 21 of them. The Michigan case is Beggs v. Michigan, BEGGS. The states that still have this tax overlap quite neatly with states that have abortion bans. So what's fascinating is working with state legislators on this, mostly Republican, mostly men, who really, by their own admission, have great ignorance about women's bodies and reproductive health. So I could say a lot more about what I've learned, and I don't want to take up too much time, but these are very civil conversations that my team is having with Republican men, and we've learned a lot that we would like to use to move forward all gender equity issues that should follow. So lots more to learn from you and to talk about for anyone who wants to hear more.
Thanks so much, Laura. And up next is Samantha Glover. She is an organizer based in Reno, Nevada, focused on building intergenerational coalitions to fight for intersectional gender justice. She most recently led the campaign to support the Nevada ERA, which passed with overwhelming majority, and which added the most inclusive state ERA into the country, which includes sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression in the definition. She is also a co-founder of Red Equity, a youth-led organization dedicated to ending period poverty through advocacy, education, and mutual aid. And she's going to be an incoming first-year student at UVA. So we're so thrilled to have you, Samantha. Can you please share just your incredible organizing history in such a short amount of time? What motivates you, what you really care about these days, and what you'll bring to college with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I originally got introduced to organizing around my sophomore year of high school. I was writing an essay in my English class on any topic of our choice. It was an argumentative essay that was assigned. And so, of course, being the type of person I am, I pull up Ms. Magazine's website and trying to find an interesting topic that my classmates probably hadn't heard about. And that's when I stumbled upon period poverty. Now, taking a step back and recognizing the privilege to hear about this really profound public health crisis through a news article. But I did read that 1 in 4 high school students miss school because they don't have access to menstrual products. So immediately I proposed a solution in my essay in English class was to provide free menstrual products inside school bathrooms at no cost to students, because they're equally, if not more crucial than toilet paper and hand soap. And so I ended up talking to my teacher, and one thing led to another, and I found a list of lobbyists in the Nevada state legislature, because in Nevada, all lobbyists are required to register and have their information publicly available. So I found this list and went down the list calling every single one, a lot of oil and gas lobbyists and mining lobbyists. And I was saying, hi, do you want to introduce a bill on period poverty? And I got so many hangups and lots of angry old guys at me. But one thing led to another, and we had a piece of legislation that was proposed and introduced, and it ended up passing out of both houses unanimously in Nevada and signed into law. Which kind of gives a little bit of background of like bipartisan history of supporting gender justice in Nevada prior to the ERA getting on the ballot last year. But now all schools provide free menstrual products and through inside bathrooms. And so through that process, I got introduced to this incredible network of gender justice organizers in Nevada, incredible ladies who work with Now in Nevada, among others. And it is such an incredible community in Nevada that's been working to build not only intergenerational coalitions, but also bipartisan coalitions to push for gender justice. So Ting Ting did mention it, but in Nevada, our Equal Rights Amendment that's now in our Constitution forever, which means it will outlive every single person who voted for it and every single person in office right now. It means that gender justice is codified in the state forever. And it protects, this is verbatim, that regardless of race, color, creed, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, age, disability, ancestry, or national origin, which is the most amount of protected identities in the entire country is protected in Nevada. And it's a pretty long list when you're knocking on doors and telling people, which is really exciting. I know Kate actually had it fully memorized and down by the time November came around last year. But this also passed in a purple state. You all probably heard Nevada tends to be quite late to count ballots. And so everybody really considers our state to be a nail biter in control, whether it's control of the Senate or presidential elections. But despite this ballot question passed with 58.63% of majority vote, which means that equality was more popular than any Democrat and any Republican on the ballot. And despite our governorship being flipped from a Democrat to Republican, ballot question one still won with overwhelming majority. I think 6% more than any other race that was on the ballot, from ballot questions to any state assembly race, which is really, really, really big deal and sets an incredible, yeah, Kate is correct. It was 58.8. I totally misspoke there. But it sets an incredible precedent, because what happened in Nevada and what worked is we talked equality, and equality is popular. Regardless of age, the background, we had some in-person summits that Generation Ratify hosted, where we had young people coming in from across the country to contact voters, have an in-person rally and support the Equal Rights Amendment. And we had turnout from people of all backgrounds and all ages. And so when you talked about what I hope to bring to UVA, I think is an enthusiasm for the ERA. But on top of that, this understanding that we win when we work intergenerationally. Because in Nevada, historically, it's been a state that's led by older white women. And this was the first real election where equality was on the ballot. And it was being led by young people and young people of color. And I think that was really the key to our success, because it really connects to voters, because the people leading these movements are now reflecting the people who are voting now. And so bringing this spirit to Nevada, and hopefully this passion, or to Virginia from Nevada, and bringing the spirit for organizing with a can-do attitude, because we got so much doubt from national news outlets and local organizations. You know, Nevada, you have a Republican governor. How do you think this is going to work out for you? And I think Kate always says equality is popular. And when we break it down and explain that the ERA is simply equality codified, it's incredibly popular. And we're already seeing incredible implications of this amendment in Nevada. So we just have finished up our legislative session, which happens for 120 days every 2 years. So this was the first legislative session that has occurred since the Equal Rights Amendment was fully ratified and published. And we have a Democratic majority in our state legislature right now, but we do have a Republican governor. And so there were so many economic justice bills or renting justice bills that were vetoed by our governor that were passed, yet a lot of gender justice bills still passed because we had the structure of the Equal Rights Amendment to use as a backbone that really almost limited the governor's ability to veto gender justice because it's codified in our Constitution. And one good example of that is now in Nevada, all licensed health insurance providers are required to provide gender affirming care, and it is no longer classified as a cosmetic procedure. So that directly is impacting trans lives and the suicide rate of trans youth. And that is all in relation, and it didn't happen. That's not by accident that it happened in the session after the ERA was passed. So I'm really happy to talk about what the ERA in Nevada means, not only for Nevadans, for our state legislature, but also the precedent it sets for states around the country to codify these protected identities. But yeah.
That is amazing. I think that just coming off of a week of witnessing the Supreme Court living their best lives and just completely dismantling democracy and really shrinking the definition of equality that we want at this time to be fully inclusive of everybody, not just white Christian men. I'm really glad I find this conversation to give me a lot of hope in a dark time, just to know that there are young people and just intergenerationally, just people who have their feet firmly planted on the ground doing work that has real impact. And all these rights start at the state level and then make their way up to the Supreme Court and then create long-lasting precedent. So I want to I guess take a step back and open up the conversation. Let's talk about what's at stake here, talking about the Supreme Court and what's happening. I guess the big umbrella question that I have for everyone is, what do we have to gain with an ERA, and what do we have to lose without an ERA? So Liza, I'll pose that question to you because I know that Virginia is a very special case. It was a leader very much at the forefront of the revival of the ERA movement when people thought it kind of died. And then after Trump's election, with everything happening with the Women's March, the Me Too movement, Virginia, led by women of color, Black, queer women legislators, had the vision to think, no, we can actually bring this back because it was never dead to begin with, and we're gonna try to ratify the ERA. And the attempt that happened before 2020, which was successful in resulting in Virginia becoming 38th and final state, needed to ratify a constitutional amendment to satisfy the requirement to add it to the Constitution. The year before, there was an attempt, and it did fail by one vote. And then there was a massive, electoral campaign around that. People were, newly elected to in order to bolster this effort forward. And then, unfortunately, then you see a shift in the political climate, and then you see things kind of regressing, Virginia then dropping out of that lawsuit. So can you talk about sort of the opportunities that can present themselves on the ground and what needs to happen to further enhance these opportunities to fight against this, never-ending onslaught of people trying to restrict our rights?
Well, you're right about that. It is never ending. And I think that this week especially we saw, I cannot be the only person who did not have a whole lot to celebrate yesterday in terms of this country. So I think that as far as the resurgence that we saw in Virginia and taking that energy forward, it shows that, like you said, Samantha, when equality is on the ballot, people are going to show up. Majority of Americans agree and will fight for equality. And so we just have to be sending the message home that the Equal Rights Amendment really is just about the equality for all people. And like you said, it's so incredible to hear everything that you got to do in Nevada, Samantha, because hearing that the ERA directly affected gender affirming care is incredible. And that's what it's all about. It's all about intersectional equality. And so I think that we have a lot on the line. And I think that what worked in Virginia is that we were able to use equality into the election, and we really used that to our advantage, and we were really able to grill politicians about what they believed in. And so that has to be the focus of the elections going forward. We need equality candidates, and that's one of the biggest things that we do with Vote Equality, since we're a nonprofit and nonpartisan organization. It really is just about educating voters on who is an equality candidate, who is representing them, and what those people believe in. Because like you said, equality is something that we all agree in and that we all are fighting for. And so it is something that has to be top of mind going into election season.
Great. And Samantha, I mean, you talked about witnessing the first legislative term with an ERA on the books in the Constitution, and what a transformative change it has brought to advocates and legislators on the ground and rethinking what's possible. So, you know, on the one hand, there's the idea of the ERA coming in to update problematic things, to wipe the slate clean of discriminatory laws. And on top of that, there's an opportunity to reimagine what's even possible, to do the kind of things that people thought, well, we can't do that, so we'll just live with the present day reality, right? So can you talk a little bit about what is possible in Nevada? What is being charted beyond just the kind of like the first step of cleaning house and, you know, making sure that things are legal under this new ERA?
Absolutely. So, talking about Nevada is one of my favorite things ever. I think Nevada tends to go under the radar as a gender justice powerhouse state. But in terms of menstrual equity, we eliminated the tampon tax in around 2018, I believe, by popular vote. It was a ballot question as well. Menstrual products are free in our public middle, junior, charter, and high schools. We have over-the-counter birth control available without a prescription. And among a lot of other things, we just proposed a constitutional amendment, actually this past session, in our first session with an ERA, that codifies protections for people who travel out of state for abortion care, because we are the only state in really the Mountain West and also parts of the Pacific Northwest. So we receive a lot of abortion tourism. And what we were able to do with this ERA is pass legislation that protects people traveling to seek abortion care. And it was not vetoed by our Republican governor, which really bucked the standard of Republican governors, particularly in our region. And again, it's not an accident this happened after the ERA was ratified and published, because he is aware what the ERA means in our Constitution, and that vetoing these types of legislation that are very clearly constitutional is truly not a viable option. And so what we can see the ERA as a vehicle for, and seeing all of the opportunity it creates, is in other states where equality is incredibly popular, but we might see a future with authoritarian or very far right-wing potential to get elected officials in office that are quite conservative, particularly on gender issues, is the ERA is a safety net for all these issues that we don't even think could be an option. Whether it's, oftentimes we talk about the ERA, we don't talk about protecting trans youth, but what the ERA does is directly protects trans youth who are being attacked like crazy right now, right? And all of these issues are intersectional. It has to do with race too, which is a whole other issue in Nevada. Our Equal Rights Amendment protects specifically race and national origin, which is really relevant in Nevada. I can tell you about sundown towns and sundown sirens in Nevada, which still exist. We still have multiple towns in Nevada that play sundown sirens, which, if you don't know, are sirens that were created to notify people of color, particularly Indigenous people, that they needed to leave the area at sundown in all white towns. And that those sundown sirens are now opening discussion about this is unconstitutional under our ERA, and policies that we thought were allowed by loopholes are now being closed. The ERA closes loopholes with so many things like ageism. We're talking about it protects age. And as a young person, we experience ageism and advocacy all the time. And the ERA actually protects against that. So truly, if you have any issue, we've even talked about climate issues and the ERA protecting against young people's right to a livable climate because it specifically protects in Nevada, regardless of age. And I shouldn't be discriminated against by the state of Nevada when mining companies are getting tax breaks and getting to pass all of these standards for regulation. And that's violating my right to a livable environment and my right as a young person under the ERA. So it's truly limitless how far we can take the ERA as a vehicle for protections for everyone.
Amazing. Thank you. And Laura, if I can kind of characterize your story about law school and how you issue spotted the question of the tampon tax and how incredibly unconstitutional it is, it feels to me like an example of like what we lose without an ERA, right? We just lose an incredible amount of brain power and intelligence and kind of intuitive knowledge of equality. I just imagine how many Lauras are there who are brilliant and in law school and thinking, wait a minute, that doesn't check out. That doesn't make sense at all. Perhaps I had some questions about the 14th Amendment in law school, but I just sort of dropped it because just didn't feel like there was a path to continue that line of thought and to argue against something that was invisible or that, was either accepted or just didn't seem like there was a real pathway to justice. Now, I do think that the moral arc bends toward justice. So it's no matter what, it might take a matter of time, but we're going to be on the path toward equality and toward justice and freedom for all, including gender, right? But it just occurs to me just how much is lost when people intuitively understand something to be unequal or unjust, but then just lack that kind of pathway to build that bridge toward equality. And here we have the ERA, which has been, past all constitutional requirements and is in many ways considered the 28th Amendment to the Constitution. So we have it already. We have a couple of procedural legal hurdles to get over, but that's really nothing that Congress can't take care of, or nothing that like all branches of government can't wake up one day soon and decide, let's just implement the ERA and act like it's in the Constitution, which already is. So this is a really long way for me to ask my question, which is, can you reflect on what it felt like to kind of be at the precipice of feeling injustice and then not really knowing what the pathway is, and then charting out the pathway kind of on your own and then getting to this point today?
Wow, that's an amazing question, Ting Ting. As your questions often are, I'm so blown away. I think the I wrote up a lot of lawsuits like this when I was a law student. This was the easy one. It just seems so stupid and obvious. And I can't believe that I'm, working on this issue still. But like I said earlier, I feel like it has presented opportunities I never thought I would have, which is to work closely now, mostly in Republican trifecta states, Republican-led states, and work closely with Republican lawmakers. I think I'm demurring on your question, but I feel that what I didn't really fully understand is, I thought that the fact that these products were taxed was just the clearest evidence that, the laws were passed, sales tax laws, which were passed in the 1930s through the 1980s in this country, were passed by legislatures that were almost entirely male. And, there was no representation, and there was just this incredible ignorance. But now what I realize is, along with the ignorance, there is just this inertia, this, what's so compelling Samantha, about the story you told is that we all know right now that the courts are becoming less reliable arbiters of what's constitutional and what isn't. And, what's so compelling to me about the work you did is to live in a time in Nevada where, almost 60% of the public is supporting this equality law, means that you don't need litigators. That's like I was saying, that in law school, I felt like we could sue for these injustices. But today, and even in the work that I do, and someone asked about the name of the case in Michigan, we were worried, as we all should be, about taking an equality or equal protection ERA case to the courts. So I think, circling back to your question, Ting Ting, what I realized is that because I've been working on this issue so long, and not full time, but over the years, sort of seeing how this is played out, is that our system has changed in a lot of ways. We all know, what's happened with the Supreme Court. These ballot initiatives are so powerful, and it makes me think of all the other gender inequities that we need to get in front of voters. Of course, there's blowback of ballot initiatives. I know that from my work at the Brennan Center for Justice on Voting Rights, and that they're that people who are anti-democracy are pushing back on democracy, are trying to make it harder for ballot initiatives and voters to make their voice heard. So I think, to answer your question, Ting Ting, I feel like what I've learned is that we, every decade we live in a different kind of country. There's so many levers that we use to try to protect equality and advance it. And we sometimes some levers are more powerful than others. When I started this project, even in 2016, in March 2016, going to the court seemed really promising, which we did in New York. Now I don't want to go to court on to argue about the unconstitutionality of the tampon tax anymore. I'm saying this in this closed circle, but that we can't do it that way. We can't get this job done that way. And like I said, Samantha, I think the power of your governor knowing that, vast majority, huge majority of people support this, means that you don't have to go to court to protect gender affirming care and those really important things that the legislature can push through now. So I don't know how I managed to do Ting Ting, but that's what I got for now.
Thank you. I really appreciate your thoughtfulness. So many things baffle my mind. Our minds are baffled when we talk about the ERA, but just the kind of the gaps in knowledge and sort of education systems. And I wonder, for Samantha and Liza, who are about to go to college or just graduated, and even Laura, you have children who are in college or just graduated. How has your activism and advocacy informed how you engage in your academic environment? Like how far, especially in this age of sort of like restrictive, restrictive policies against curriculum and against knowledge and information, how it's taught in schools. How far can you push this gender justice agenda within your sort of educational communities and really create some culture change there?
I'm going to let Samantha take the lead off on this because I'm really interested to hear it from a high school perspective. When I started this work, it was in college. And I think that you said something earlier about age discrimination and advocacy, and how a lot of times the younger you are, the less your voice seems to be heard. And so I am interested to hear how your experience was in high school.
Absolutely. I think I see a lot of other Generation Ratify organizers on Zoom here today as well. And I think what's so exciting about being a young person in this movement is learning from young people. So nearly every organizing tactic that I've used throughout high school, I learned from other high schoolers. Generation Ratify does an incredible job of training young people to be advocates in their own communities. So whether that looks like walkouts in high school or empowering young people to host teach-ins at their schools. I know, at least in Nevada, after Roe, the leak that precursed the overturn of Roe happened in Nevada, we had high school students walking out from more than 10 different high schools across the state on a coordinated day of action. And that was really empowering to see, because not only did we focus on walking out in this demonstrated direct action, but it also focused on instruction and teaching peer-to-peer. And luckily, I think in Nevada and in the communities that I've experienced, people are really receptive to learning about the Equal Rights Amendment, yet it still isn't part of our curriculum. I don't think I ever learned, at least in any traditional classroom setting in school, about the Equal Rights Amendment, but rather we were all aware after taking some government classes, the process to publish and ratify a constitutional amendment with those 2/3 majority requirements. So luckily, I've never been in any restrictive learning environments that prohibited the discussion of the ERA, but I do know that some other organizers have experienced places where they might not have been approved to have a book club. There's some incredible organizers. Julia Crafton, she started a book club at her school, and she wasn't sure if the ERA would be approved. So she called it their Eras book club on the permission slip proposal to their principal, and said they were reading about different eras of history together while they were working in partnership with Ting Ting's team to learn about the ERA through peer-to-peer instruction. So while I know you mentioned, Liza, that sometimes it feels like young people have, I guess, less of a voice in these scenarios, I think we as young people have the power to flip that and actually show that young people sometimes have the most power, because when a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old or a 15-year-old is speaking in front of their school or to their classmates or speaking truth to power, I think that can be an incredibly powerful sight to see. So rather, I think young people have the most power, particularly in this movement, because young people have the most to gain, but we also have the most to lose. And speaking truth to that can be incredibly impactful, especially in high school, middle school settings.
I'm like so in awe of you.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I also, I feel a little bit annoyed to admit that I don't think I ever thought about, I don't think the ERA was taught when I went to law school, and that's a shame. But I also think that, the gender justice jurisprudence that was built by Ruth Bader Ginsburg was also kind of glossed over, right? Like a quick 10-minute conversation, let's move on. And so, I have young children, but they know what the ERA is, and they actually can think very kind of clearly about discrimination and equality in a way that disadvantages me as their parent because they use it against me. But I guess my question for Laura is, and also, everybody else on this call who's a parent, how do you think about the fact that there's just a real lack of gender justice education that belongs in the Constitution? And where is that effort there? I think that that's very much intrinsically a part of the ERA movement, is how do we embed this conversation as early as possible? How do we talk to kids in pre-K about what equality is, what formal equality is versus substantive equality? why affirmative action is something that's been a part of this country forever and is not a negative thing. You know what I mean? I wanted to know, Laura, if you had some thoughts about that as a parent of brilliant college kids.
Well, I would say I would answer more from all the young people I've worked with and say that periods is a great educator. Just Samantha, that's how you got started. When that's what's been so amazing about this period equity movement, is getting young people to see how idiotic and unequal, unfair it is that, we're bringing products to school, we're missing school because we can't afford products. It's so easy to relate to. So that's when you begin, just as I did as a law student, to wonder, how did we get to this situation? There's this great video, a YouTuber, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting her name, but she interviewed President Obama, when he was president back in 2016, and told him that there's this sales tax on menstrual products. And he was surprised. He had never heard of it. And he was asked, why do you think we have this? And he said, well, I guess there were not many people who had periods who were making laws back then. And so I do think that it is an eye opener, not, to anybody who's first finding out about this, and it's enraging. And that's sort of the ingredients to thinking more broadly about, what we need to do to achieve the kind of equality that we all think we deserve. But it is interesting, the ERA presents, that's I think that thinking of gateway issues to move further. And Samantha, I'm taking your story away with me, because the way you evolved your interests from this assignment to write about a topic that people might not have heard about, enrage them, and then move forward to now be working on the big gender equity issues is a great model that like I said, is an important story to share with other young activists, because we are making headway, just as you have in Nevada, that we are achieving some sort of menstrual equity where there are products in schools and so forth. But these young people, and I work closely with period.org, which has over 400 chapters in the US. But if we can work together, Samantha, to help lay out what are the next projects that students should work on and use Nevada's achievements and your work with legislators and constituents and stakeholders as a model, that I think that's what your group and these groups are trying to do. But I know that a lot of folks who work on menstrual equity through period.org, we should be working with you more closely.
Awesome. Robin has her hand up, so let Robin pose her question. I also encourage people to ask questions in the chat. We have about 10 minutes left. So Robin.
Hi, I'm beaming in from Utah, Nevada. I just wish that you would leak over this way a little bit. I will be in Seneca Falls, and Pat Spearman's going to be one of my roommates. So I'm really looking forward to the event.
Party.
I did want to say that I think that young people like Samantha are going to demand the education in high school and the younger grades. And I just want to tell you a quick little anecdote. My granddaughter is 8. She's in her 2nd grade. On about the 3rd day, they give her a little form to fill out. I'm sure they're trying to figure out, can they write, just do an assessment. But one of the questions was, who was your favorite president? And this little 8-year-old wrote in this little, really simple cursive, the first woman And I just loved it that a second-year-old would put that in there, that the first woman was her favorite president. So I think we are going to see that demand from younger generations to know more and to be enlightened, let's just say, on so many of these issues that we're facing. So Nevada, good work. I just want to say, you and Kate, good work. Good work.
Thank you. I saw an earlier question is, and maybe we can talk about kind of tactics a little bit. Somebody posed a question of how do you guys think about engaging with the media and doing the organizing that you do? And then I guess I'll add on to that, which is how do you think through public-private partnerships and the work that you do as well? Who would like to start? Liza?
Yeah, I was just going to say that as far as media goes for our work, I would say that it's a little bit easier to get just because it's a big purple RV coming to town promoting equality, right? So it is kind of a moving billboard in its own right, which has really worked for us. People will, you see it on the highway and you're like, what is this? What is this? And they will follow you and ask questions about it. So I think that is one thing that even in Nevada, we decked out a car in a truck that Kate drove around, an artist for ERA artwork. And I think that it just kind of becomes a moving billboard. So the media they're going to have their agenda for what they want to cover. But I do think that creating a buzz around things is definitely the best way to go about it. And then also, working with a network is so important. When we go to the South and when we do tours with the RVG, we're not just showing up anywhere, right? We are strategizing with local grassroots organizers. And so I think one of the biggest things is just finding your network of people that are doing the work in the area as well will amplify your cause. And so I think that there really is power in numbers, and doing something a little flashy will always get a little attention.
Samantha? Oh, who wants to go ahead, Samantha?
Oh, awesome. I was just going to say, I think, at least in my own experiences in terms of getting local news coverage, what's been really helpful, and Generation Ratify has some amazing resources on this. I think Adam asked about it, is just sending information and kind of a template form email to as many reporters as you can find. I think persistence is key in all aspects of organizing. And I think that's the best advice I can give, is if you get a no, maybe the next one will be a yes, and to keep asking, whether it's reaching out to reporters, or asking legislators or asking school officials. And it's also about creating allies. So in Nevada, we know a few reporters that really care about gender justice in their own personal agendas. So they try to further that by reporting on gender justice issues. And so they've been really helpful when we contact them and bringing their people out and solidifying allies, both in the media and then also in public-private partnerships. So whether that's people who are willing to donate product, like menstrual products, or support rallies by having a local printing shop do our t-shirts and our posters. It's just talking about it. And anybody who's passionate about the ERA, just talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, talk to the news reporters, talk to everyone about the ERA, because we come back to the bottom line that equality is popular and people want to support equality in the ways that they can. I think everybody can strive that's on this call and just generally to do what they can with what they have to share and what they have to give. So whether that's their company reaching out or them utilizing their professional expertise, but doing what you can with what you have to give. And that means in the ERA movement and every other movement. But asking that of other people has been incredibly helpful, because people want to support, but sometimes it just takes an ask to get them there, to meet you there.
Thank you. And Laura, when we talk about gender equality, period equity, I mean, there are real economic incentives to getting behind that. I know that you've done different partnerships with companies and, people who perhaps they think it's really a sexy issue to get behind and it's great for just public facing value, but also that there are, it's economically viable for people to get behind equality, especially gender equality. So can you talk a little bit more about that? I think that conversation about money is underexplored in this movement.
Yeah, like I was trying to say earlier, very inarticulately, that, my feelings about how to get rid of the tax to make things happen keeps evolving. And I was surprised that CVS Health actually, reached out to my organization to partner on removing the tax. And I mean, it's a female-run company, CVS Health. It's a Fortune 4 company, it's huge, but they internally decided that they thought that we shouldn't have a tax, and they are now paying the sales tax on behalf of consumers in every state where they can do that legally. So in the 21 remaining states, they can do that, I think in 9 states. And they also, in good faith, they reduced the cost of their in-store brand by 25%, because there was, concern that once the tax was gone, that the companies would pass on the extra amount to consumers. And so I was really surprised. We worked with a small brand called Lola in 2019. And now CVS Health is working with us. They're funding some of our work to get rid of the tax. So any nonpartisan issue is really appealing to companies, I have found. And if there are resources that are needed, we should have the companies pay up. Their employees all support equality. If the population, the majority, supports equality. So they have marketing budgets. They have a lot of money to spend. So I think in every state where there is a campaign for an ERA, then there's a headquarters of a big company that will like to put its name on something supported by majority of voters. So it takes work, but it's definitely worth pursuing. The more resources, the more effective a campaign.
Thank you. So we are at time. I did not plan to end on a follow the money kind of theme, but here we are. Thank you everyone for joining us. And I want to thank our speakers so much. This has been a very lively and inspiring conversation. Just sharing that the full curriculum for these 5-week series, these workshops will be available through the ERA project. And they will include, the curriculum will include guidelines for self-study and also how to create public conversations and to curate days of learning within your community, replicating what we've done so far here, as well as a platform to plug into a broader ERA movement. So stay tuned for that. I want to thank everyone for joining us and have a great night.